we're going to switch topics now. Okay. So we just went with the mindset of how do we get the license? I'm going to change topics. This next session is now I have the license. What do the next 60 days look like? Right? A lot of times we just think about getting the license. Now we actually have to run this thing. Okay. So the first 60 days, what are a couple of things that you wish somebody would have told you? Joy, let's go with you.
Yeah, so we got licensed actually around Independence Day. So July 4th weekend, we got licensed. And after you got licensed, the state of Washington gives you 15 days to get your plants in the ground. They don't care where they come from. They just said, hey, get your plants in the ground. You know, they didn't care. So it was a gray area, gray window. And we had to get our plants in the ground and really like start growing, right? And at the time we grew in ground, we didn't grow in pots, right? And we thought, okay, well, this is, you know, the only way that we knew how to grow, you grow in ground. And so we had to dig holes. We had to put different type of soil because remember I told you the soil that we had on our land was not actually like really good. It was a lot of boulders. So we had to dig different holes and so forth. And, you know, it was a lot of learning. It was a lot of trial and error. And so when I go back to those first 60 days, I wish someone had told us to just be a little bit more prepared. So I wish we had done a little bit more research about maybe we should have grown in pots. Now we grow in pots, but, you know, growing about in pots, thinking about how to scale on a large scale. We went from growing in a basement to now having, you know, 10,000 plants. And so going from 10 plants to 10,000 plants is two different things. You know, the nutrients you use for 10 plants isn't going to work for 10,000 plants. So I wish someone had told us, you know, think about scaling on a large scale. Also think about just being a little bit more prepared for the process. And then also, I really wish somebody had told us, instead of thinking about growing, thinking about farming and agriculture. So we were looking at videos and techniques that, oh, how do you grow the best plant? When farming has been around for decades, since the beginning of time, and no one's reinventing the wheel. And so we started looking on farming videos, and that's when it clicked to us. So I wish we had taken a perspective of actually farming and not thinking like, okay, we're just growing 10 plants on a massive scale. That would have saved us a lot of time, a lot of headaches, and a lot of fights.
And Frannie, you've kind of had a leg up on everybody because your previous business was actually agriculture and farming.
That is correct. I was well aware of most things relating to agriculture, and will agree with everything that Joy said. But and we were growing on a large scale here licensing in our county. So we weren't quite as surprised about what we needed to do, but it really falls into three different categories after you're licensed. It's agriculture, it's cannabis growing, legal cannabis growing, and the business aspect. The business aspect to me was the hardest because I'm someone who likes to grow, but once you're legal, there are tremendous things. You've got to, do all your book work. You've got to do all the legal things that go along with it. So there's money, there's sales that have to be accounted for and written down. There are people you have to meet to be able to sell your product and have a good relationship with them. Once the cannabis plant is legal, they test practically every bag of bud that you put out for sale, and you can no longer use any of the even organic pesticides and etc. Because they are outlawed, and when things are tested, nothing can show up. As well as Joy said, the farming and the roads to get to the cannabis areas on our property, keeping the water. We've got, I said before, 10,000 or more feet of pipe, not constantly breaking, but occasionally breaking. There are animals that we deal with. So it's kind of the ABCs of being legal. Legal cannabis, the business aspect, and the agriculture itself, and the farming.
How did you guys choose your strains? You know, New York is very particular with specific strains that we have. New York Sour Diesel, you know, ocean grown OGs on the West Coast. So how did you guys pick the strains? Did you start with 100 during that kind of, you know, gray area and then narrow it down based on how your climate was, or were there certain things that you specifically knew that you wanted?
And where'd you get them?
Well, we try to grow the best strains we can on our ranch. And when we first started, we would just drive wherever needed to buy clones, just because we didn't have the facility to have our own nursery. We now are a licensed nursery. So not only do we start our own strains or, you know, start them from seed, but we sell limited amounts of our genetics. So we just have great guys who look for the seeds, you know, specific genetic seeds, and we do everything on our own now.
Yeah, you know, so we started out like Frannie, we wanted to grow the best cannabis possible. The thing is that, you know, what we realized is that what we grow out in Washington State might be way different climate, obviously, that happens in Southern Oregon or California. So those strains might be a little bit different than what we grow out here in Washington in a greenhouse that someone might grow in a warehouse downtown Seattle. Like there's just so much different variables that comes with growing. And so we first started out with 60 strains. I didn't know what we were thinking. We started out with 60 strains. And then every year we continue to pare those down because we figured out, okay, what yielded the most? What's the best type of bud? Washington State's business model is very different than other states because we're the only state where you can't be vertically integrated. So business models here, you can't sell direct to consumer. It's more about mass production. It's more about, you know, quantity. Right. And so we had to figure out what the best buds were, obviously that smoked well, but also grew well, that also yielded well, because we had to make sure that when we did our cultivation, that it was, you know, we were getting the most out of our time, obviously on the farm in that short window that we can grow on the peninsula, which is from March through Croptober and October. So those were the two variables.
Then how are you growing? Are you indoor, outdoor, hybrid, greenhouse? How did you make that decision?
We couldn't afford to go indoor. You know, indoor is very expensive, obviously, because a lot of things that you have to, I apologize, my dog, a lot of things that you have to do in terms of light, you know, electricity bill. I know guys that have more electricity bills than my rent. And I'm like, not even my rent, but just like my, you know, mortgage or anything. I'm like, this is crazy to me, right? But you know, we decided to grow greenhouse a couple things. We're in Washington State. It's very, very like environmental friendly here. We have a governor who ran his entire presidential campaign on climate control, right? And trying to figure out what that looks like. So we knew we wanted to grow in greenhouses. We wanted to utilize the best resource known to man, the sun. And then also, you know, wanting to make sure that we just had a low carbon footprint. That was really, really important to us. And I think growing in greenhouses, I've seen Frannie's, they're phenomenal. Growing in greenhouse, I think, is like one of the best ways to grow cannabis. And no knock on our indoor friends, but I think we're, you know, we're right where we need to be.
What about you, Frannie? How did you guys decide, and what method are you growing?
Well, we now are down to about 20 strains that grow well in our area and in specific areas on our ranch. We use both. We have 4 large light depth greenhouses where we grow continuously all year round. And we have right now 4 acres of outdoor grow. And we have generally 1 grow. We're trying for 2 grows for the outdoor because our weather might allow it. And oh, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question? I can't hear.
You're on mute, Lulu.
I swear this isn't my first rodeo. So you were saying that I was asking what type of grow methods are you guys using? And you're doing both indoor, or sorry, you're both doing light depth greenhouse and then doing outdoor cycles as well.
Right, with the sunshine, trying to use as much natural light as possible.
And then how is there a system that you're using for tracking? I know there's, you know, the seed to sale programs that's mandated by state for compliance, but are there other tools or software that you're using to track all of this?
Well, in California, we're on the metric system, and it's a very complicated tagging system, but we've got a program for it and we get it done.
Joy, are you guys on metric in Washington also?
Yeah, everything has to be tagged compliance wise. When the plant reaches a certain height, then you have to tag it. But we use a software called GrowFlow, and it was actually invented by a guy who used to be in the industry on a producer processor side and saw how cumbersome stuff was. Sorry, they didn't pay me to say this. It's the best. We love using the software. And it, you know, we're able to figure out what our yields are, but then we also use simple like a Excel spreadsheet form. So we're able to say, okay, this is how much we grew last year. This is what strains grew well. Because we're able to take that data from that software and then put in an Excel sheet and kind of just figure out just basics. Okay, this is what grew well. This is how many plants turned over. You know, this is how much crop loss we did. We used to get sad about just one plant dying. Now we're just, you know, and that's what, you know, that's all we knew. And now you're like, you know, it's just one plant. It's going to be okay. But, you know, we use kind of that metrics to figure out what we're going to grow next. And we've limited it down now and it varies between 10 to 15 strains, light depth greenhouses. And we harvest from end of May. Memorial Day is like our day where we're like harvesting all the way through October. And then we're down for the count for a couple months. But we keep our moms growing to be able to have for the next year for clones. So we're constantly cloning year round, but you know, we're really harvesting and growing from May all the way through October.
So someone on your team needs to be familiar with metric and all the rules and regulations on that. There are other software out there that kind of lay on top of that can make it easier, like the one that you mentioned. And then one last thing I wanted to ask, how did you set up your security, and what are the necessary things that are required for security?
Yeah, state requires the state requires you to have, it doesn't have like a minimum of cameras. They just require every like corner of your property to have some type of camera on it to, you know, be able to videotape it, and you have to have it for at least 45 days. And so the state at any point in time can come on your property, rewind back 45 days and just kind of just view your footage. And so we have over about 60 cameras on site. And then we also have a huge fence, like a fence with barbed wire on the top. We were getting pizza delivered one time, and the guy asked, was it like Jurassic Park? That's what it reminded him, because we have the gates, like the, you know, car gate and everything. So it's, you can't really see what's going on behind those doors. We just wanted a little bit of privacy. And it's because, you know, we do have neighbors that are close by. So we wanted to make sure that we were protected that way. And we are able to look at our property at any point in time, the cameras on our phone, no matter where we are.
Frannie, you have 1,100 acres. How are you guys even managing or handling that?
Well, luckily for us, most of it goes up, and we probably only have about a mile and a half on the road as far as the and we are fenced all around. We basically have the same setup as Joy. We've got cameras where they can come in and check, what's been going on. And they pretty much cover all of our lower area. On the rest of our mountain, we, thank goodness, haven't been required to have cameras.
So everyone, please make sure to allocate enough money for storage space of those 45 days of video that are high def required.
I forgot one thing, Lulu. I forgot we have about 15 dogs on our property.
Oh.
And that works. It
That will
really
do it.
works.
That'll do it.
I can't help but notice this is the dog panel. Everybody here has had a dog like poke their head in and say what's up. So security tip. All right, we're gonna jump to our next session. On this last one, we talked about the first 60 days. So we thank you. I got some notes here on like figuring out your growing mediums, dialing in your nutrients. And there's a big difference between a small grow and scaling to agriculture. You got to figure out how you're going to get your books right. 280E is no joke. We're not going to get into that right now. That'll be a completely different panel, but figure out how you're going to do your books, your security, your data servers, making sure that you are tracking every single plant, because the states do not